Susan again from the Beverly Library, and we are at the 7th of our walking tours, and we are in the process of doing the hop, skip, and jump portion of our tour. And we are out here at the Round Bottom School. The one-room brick school at Round Bottom near Coal Run was built in 1795. As soon as it was safe to leave the fort, Samuel Cushing, Allen Duval Benjamin Shaw, and David Wilson went down to the river to claim their donated land. They built their cabins, planted crops, and built a school for their children's education. The school got its name from the circular appearance of the river bottom lands east of the Muskingum River. The school still stands today and is surrounded by some of the best producing farmland in the Muskingum Valley. The school is now owned by Waterford Township and is thought to be the oldest one-room brick school still standing in the state of Ohio. Now, also, the local historical society is in the process of trying to bring it back to its former glory. And also, while I'm here, there is a cemetery here too, and it is the Round Bottom Cemetery, and it has a very nice plaque to go with it. And then over here at the schoolhouse, it also has its own little plaque. Alrighty, hold on a second, we're going to make a jump. Alrighty, I'm down here on 4th Street at the John Dodge Senior Center. Now originally, this property was donated by John Dodge, and it was originally the township building. After a while, they moved that up onto 5th Street, and I figure this sat empty for a while, and now it is the senior center. Now, I mentioned him last time, and I'll mention him again today and tell you more of his story. The senior John Dodge. So who was he? Let's see. So Captain John Dodge was the grandson of Lord John Dodge of Wrotham, Kent County, England, whose descendants came to Massachusetts in 1629. The direct ancestor of the Dodges of Beverly, Massachusetts, and Ohio were John Birthhouse Dodge, to whom was given the coat of arms and crest for his valiant service in the War of Edward I of England. Following the footsteps of his ancestor, Captain John Dodge was an officer in the Revolutionary War, serving until its close. He then joined the Ohio Company of Associates when it was organized in 1787. He was one of those individuals helping to establish civilization in the Northwest Territory in Ohio. Dodge undertook the long and hazardous journey into the Ohio Valley to confer with and escort the various Indian chiefs of the tribes owning the lands in the valley to Philadelphia, where Congress was sitting and where final arrangements were made for ceding a tract of land to the government called the Northwest Territory. He was bred to the profession of arms and had accompanied several military men and a surveying crew on expeditions to parts of the new country. He had acquired a great knowledge of Indian languages and customs that allowed him to succeed in his mission. He was a firm believer in the power of God to protect him, traveling on an intelligent horse, accustomed to the crackle of forest trails, mountain roads, forging streams, and frontier fare. Dodge completed his mission without one act of bloodshed. On this same horse, he traveled from Philadelphia to Boston to visit his family. He had traveled thousands of miles over the Alleghenies and back. And he's the one that first built the grist mill that I told you about last week. Now, he didn't travel alone, or he didn't come to Ohio alone. He came with his wife, and she was Susanna Dodge. According to quote records of the military surgeon who periodically visited Fort Harmon, Marietta, Waterford, and the French settlement of Gallipolis, there was no physicians in the forts during his absence. Susanna Morgan Dodge cared for a number of of his patients, the gifts she possessed for healing the sick, using common sense and courage, were soon adapted to the needs and sacrifices of life in the Ohio country. At Millsburg, Mrs. Dodge supervised the planting of flax fields and had wheels made for making of thread and looms for weaving of cloth. A linen garment made at this time was preserved by the Ohio Historical Society. Twice a week, Mrs. Dodge held classes and instructed the children at the Taylor Blockhouse and at Fort Fry in the Puritan faith. She taught them the spiritual essence of life. Family worship were maintained in her home and was kept up for many generations. When the Marquis de Lafayette heard that she had joined the Ohio Company, he supposedly said, "There will be a princess in the courts of the wilderness." He had known Mrs. Dodge in the East. Both Captain John Dodge and his wife Susanna Morgan Dodge are buried in the most western part of the Waterford Cemetery along with other pioneers. Captain Dodge was born in 1747 and died October 8, 1805. His wife Susanna was born in 1754 and died in 1798. Now, just so you know, this was an excerpt from Cornerstone's Stories of the Lower Muskingum Valley by Winnie Smith Johnson. Okay, so I'm up here at Beverly Cemetery, and when I was looking for something else, I found the stone for a Captain Daniel Davis. And from the stone, I thought I needed to look him up because he sounded like he might have been a character. And yes, he was. So, from his biography, Captain Daniel Davis lived in his young manhood on his father's farm in the easterly part of Kingley, Connecticut, and moved soon after coming of age to Thompson Parish. He bought land in various quarters and was very active in society and public affairs. Daniel was very active during the Revolutionary War. He was chosen at the very onset to collect donations for the relief of the poor in Boston and retained throughout in many responsible services, such as recruiting and outfitting men for the army and also providing for the families of those who had entered the service. His patriotism induced him to sacrifice his own property for the public good, advancing money which was repaid in decrepited currency. Till his estate was seriously involved, Daniel fought personally during the war and was promoted to the rank of captain, where he often led his company into battle. Now that's where we get he was under the personal command of General George Washington. And I read a story, and I'm going to tell it here, but I'm not 100% sure if it goes with Captain Daniel Davis, but it's too good of a story not to share. So, okay. So Washington needed to take out a fort. And on one side, it was heavily fortified. And on the back side, it was a sheer cliff. So, if I'm right, it's Davis here, led a group of his men, and they climb up, Spider-Man style, the backside of the cliff, got into the fort, and let General Washington in, which let them have the day. So, after the return of peace, his attention was turned to the subject of westward immigration, and he joined the Company of Ohio Associates, which under General Rufus Putnam traversed the wilderness in the spring of 1788 and begun the settlement of Ohio. In the autumn of 1785, General Benjamin Tupper, authorized by Congress, went to the Ohio country as surveyor. Due to the hostility of the Indians, he was unable to complete a survey, but from what he saw and heard of the West, he was enthusiastically in favor of settling the Ohio country as soon as possible. In January of 1786, he met with General Rufus Putnam of Rutland, Massachusetts, and that meeting resulted in an agreement to attempt to form a company to purchase and settle the western lands of the Ohio. At a meeting in November 1787, the directors of the Ohio Company selected surveyors of the lands they had purchased in the West. At the same meeting, they employed a number of workmen, including carpenters, boat builders, and blacksmiths, to make preparations for the journey to the Ohio Valley. After all supplies and livestock were procured, they were assembled with the workmen at Danvers, Massachusetts, where they started out on their journey west. They took their dreary way over the Alleghanies and by the old Indian path over Broderick's Road, and after about a month's journey, reached the... Okay, I'm going to murder this river. Yonagani, at a point called Simrel's Ferry. There they were met by General Putnam with a smaller party made up of the surveyors and other leading men. On the banks of the Allegheny, the workers constructed the craft which was to be used to carry the settlers to the new lands. They called it the Mayflower. This boat was the largest that had ever descended the Ohio. On the afternoon of April 2nd, 1788, the Mayflower, under the command of Captain Duvall, and accompanied by a flatboat and several canoes, was unfastened from her moorings at Semmel's Ferry to float down the Allegheny to the waters of the Monongahela and onward to the Ohio. At noon on April 7th, they reached their destination and landed on the east bank of the Muskingum, about 400 yards above its mouth and nearly opposite to Fort Harmar. The little company that disembarked on the bank of the Muskingum on April 7, 1788, numbered 48 souls. A tradition widely held among his descendants is that Daniel Davis was the second man ashore when the Mayflower struck upon Point Harmar, April 7, 1788, and, as he afterward declared, wishing to do something of which his later generations would speak with pride, cut the first tree felled by a settler west of the Ohio River. This tree being a buckeye, the incident gave the state the name which it still retains. In 1789, he settled at Waterford, Ohio, where he passed the remainder of his life. After General Wayne's victory over the Miamis in 1794, he settled down to peaceful pursuits of life and aided very materially in forming the instructions of the new state. His strong mind and prudent forecast gave great influence, and he became a power for good in the section from which he was identified, helping forward every work which would tend to its elevation and advancement. Daniel died November 4th, 1807, in Waterford Township in Washington County, Ohio, and was buried at the Block House near Beverly, Washington County, Ohio. And I think that's going to conclude the 7th of our Beverly-Waterford tours. And I think next week is going to be the last one, unless I can get a few more stories. Thanks. Oh, and as always, if I misspoke or missed something, you guys are always welcome to share in the comments. See you next week.